All right. Good afternoon, board. We are live. Um, if it pleases the chair, we'll call this meeting to order.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, sir. This is the regular scheduled meeting of the engineer committee meeting. Um, it is a couple minutes after 1 o'clock, and we have a couple items there on the agenda. Let me take roll right quick. Dr. Ashraf El Sayed, Jason Carter,
Here.
Rob Barrett,
Here.
Robert Campbell, Alton Heathcote.
I'm right here.
All right, everyone's here. We are good to go. Let's see. Look, unless there's any additions, which we can of course cover in new business. I think we're free to jump into the application review. We only have one item on the application review. We're reviewing disciplinary action for one of our applicants, and we're doing this under TCA 62.2.308A1B, and that's cited as such. The board may refuse to issue or renew and revoke or suspend the certificate of registration of any architect, engineer, landscape architect, or registered interior designer registered under this chapter who is found guilty of B, of gross negligence, incompetency, or misconduct in the practice of architecture, engineering, landscape architecture, in the use of the title registered interior designer. All right. If you look at the there's quite a big document there, because you basically got a document down, just pretty much everything we had, and we just dumped it there all together, stitched together. But you're looking at two separate incidents. You're looking at pages 28 through 29 and pages 32 to 34. If you back it up a little bit, if you want the background information, you can start on page 24, and that gives you the particulars of the case in California. So there's one case in California, and then there's one case in Oklahoma for this particular individual. And then you've got some other boards that issued discipline or monitored it. And it basically breaks down to this. California put him on probation for 3 years. Texas required an ethics course based on California. So we're not looking at Texas. They're just responding to California. North Carolina was monitoring California probation with a revocation to follow if not completed successfully. I can confirm that that probation was completed successfully, so North Carolina is no longer in the mix, and both Oklahoma and California are no longer monitoring. That's been taken care of. So we're looking at just the application review. We don't have any complaints here. He's just coming to us asking for a license here. Trying to see, I believe that's it. And of course, in Oklahoma, fined him $1,000 for a separate incident in their state, which you can find on 32 through 34. And I would be remiss, I forget that we've introduced our two new members out here when we were discussing informally, but wait, let's do that formally too, if it's okay with the chair. Thanks, sir. We've got
I was about to ask you.
I forget, not everyone who's watching knows what we know.
We should welcome them, give them the secret handshake. There's some initiation, I think, that we got to do too. You're not going to like the initiation.
It's not pleasant. Yeah, we may have to reconvene afterwards if you're able.
It takes several hours.
But no, we're so thankful that both Dr. El Sayed and affectionately known as Dr. Ash as well, often to a lot of us. And then also we've got Jason Carter as well. And so we appreciate their contribution, and that we know as will be forthcoming to the board, and just their work that got them here to in the first place. We appreciate you being willing to serve and volunteering your time in that regard. And unless there's any other comments, I'll let you get back to your application review.
Okay. So, having read all this, but mainly referring to the cover letter, it appears that he's paid all the penalties, taken all the courses.
Yes, sir.
discuss any part of it.
I'll remind our new members as well, just so you know, if it's not red, we can't hear you. So we're recording, and Casey can't hear you either if she's sitting at home now. So she'll, but go ahead. To your point.
Glenn, just question, without having read all of this, did the respondent plead no contest to all of these 6 causes for discipline?
Yes, he entered into a agreed citation order with both of these jurisdictions, both Oklahoma and with California on those charges.
He's, if I understand what you said correctly, he's petitioning for a license to practice in Tennessee.
Correct. Yes, sir.
It looks like he did a couple things. Maybe it looks like he did a grading and drainage plan, and
Retaining wall.
Yeah, and there was retaining wall, and things were not tying to what they should be tied to the ground, or proposed elevations of some sort. So he was, and then there was some other contractual issue too. It appears, but I don't know that that's something that we get into it, but we, in some, unless there's just clear and obvious, that's a kind of he said, she said thing. These are tough ones, and just for the new members, I mean, we've had people that have served their time, done their thing, have committed other acts, right? I mean, they could be something that was a criminal act that they served their time and came back, and they're tough to know if they're truly rehabilitated, learned their lesson. I mean, it's just tough to know. But we have some history of multiple cases, right, where that has happened. And my question, because we can now kind of tell, right? We're letting him back in because of a work product issue. Is there something where we can say we're gonna let you back in, condition on looking at your stamp plans or we can audit your plans to see if those things are. Audit's almost better because you don't know when it's coming, right? So anyway, I couldn't remember if we had something that was conditional.
You have somewhat of a historical record, since we've got Stuart sitting next to us. He was our disciplinary action attorney before he became our staff attorney. So I'll yield to Stuart on that. Did you have you recollect any situation where they've audited or sort of not necessarily put somebody on probation, even though in effect that is in somewhat what that would require?
No, I've not seen anything like that in 4 years that I've been on the board.
I couldn't remember either, and it's been a while, but I didn't know if we had the mechanism to do that. I mean, if we've got some way to say, we're going to let you in, but keep in mind, we're going to ask you every once in a while or for submitted plans that you've.
I think that's part of the audit process.
So, it says in the attached list.
Hey, Rob.
Rob.
Oh, they can't hear
You stay on.
There you go. Go at it.
I don't see an attached list of the states he's licensed in, but going to the end, it looks like.
He is. It's I don't have that list before me, but to your point, it's multiple states. Yes, sir.
Ask for
Dr. Ash, what was that last part?
Can I ask for auditing his plans? Do we have like a mechanism for the board to hire somebody to audit his plans?
Once they There's not degrees of licensure. That's what makes this difficult. Once they're an active license, they're an active license. When all that comes with that. One mechanism is the complaints, and of course you can take past history, and we could take this under consideration. Should he get a complaint, and we come back before the board, then we could bring this back and say. And then that could have definitely affect the response of the board and the severity of the penalty in response to that complaint. Whereas maybe with one individual that had no history, that would be a mitigating factor. Whereas this would be an aggravating factor that you could take under consideration when you're working that scale as far as penalties. So it's not that you don't have any teeth whatsoever. And that in itself is an audit. I mean, should somebody complain, then certainly that's coming before the board.
Well, just to get the matter on the table and discuss, I move we accept his application for comedy.
I'll second it to kind of move forward here.
Dr. Ash, you would be our third voting member should we once we move to a full vote. So just so you know.
Any further discussion? If not, all those signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
In favor of granting him licensure in Tennessee by comedy? Okay. Aye.
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? All right. Hearing none, that is passed. We'll take care of that. And again, we'll bring this to your attention should we, and hopefully, we're past this. Both offenses, one was in 2015, one is in 2019. So hopefully they've straightened that out. But if not, and we get a complaint, then we'll bring this back to your attention then. All right. Thank you, John. Appreciate that. I think we're ready for the next item. It's the red line rules. I'll let you find that. And there's, as a part of the discussion, you will you'll have two things to reference. One is the red line rules itself, and then you'll also have the Louisiana grid. iPad right. Right. And we also have, thanks to Heidi just pointing that out to me when I went to go get my iPad, the public chapter as well. So we have the public chapter that we can reference and place up against the red line rules. And then we also have the Louisiana grid that was referenced at our last meeting. The short of the long, your primary, the definitions are the same. And I touched on this in the email. You're looking specifically at pages 7 through 8. That's the only changes that you have not seen. And that's under Applications Engineer. And basically what you're seeing is a reiteration of the public chapter that's laid on top of the rules. And there's the discussion last, and of course you'll carry that discussion forward in this committee meeting and expound upon that. But it really boiled down to two positions. Was how would you, if you take the pathway number 3, the master's pathway, how would you cure, if there are any deficiencies, how would you cure those deficiencies? Would you cure that through a related science path or through doubling of experience? As you know, the legislator has doubled the experience, and the commissioner, assistant commissioner Alex Martin, he wrote a letter to the board in regards to, in response to that as well. And so he regrets he can't be here. I mentioned that today. He's got a long-standing conflict, and so is unable to be here. Otherwise, he'd be sitting in this chair right now addressing the board. But unfortunately, he wasn't able to be here in presence. But nonetheless, he sends his regards. And I'll open it up, I guess, to discussion at this point. to the, or commit that back to the committee writ large. Oh, one thing I would like to ask or bring out, the Louisiana grid is a related science grid. If you look at that, it shows what undergrad degrees you would pair with the respective master's degree.
For the sake of clarity, would you 5 words or less tell me what this committee needs to do, what action we need to take?
There's certainly, let me pull the public chapter up.
And I think, Rob, in essence, and in keeping with your request for 25 words or less, which is nearly impossible for me, I think they're asking us to consider the alteration to the, I guess, the language that we had originally proposed, which required, I guess, it gave us the latitude to review the undergraduate degree to determine whether or not we thought it was substantiating. Like, we've had this before and we've done this before, where if the undergraduate degree is, and no offense to any other undergraduate degree, for art history as opposed to calculus or biology or chemistry, it may not be a supporting degree. But instead of that as one of the criteria, now it's just, regardless of whatever the undergraduate degree is, whether it's supporting or not, if they've got 8 years of experience and have passed the FE and the PE and have a master's in engineering, I'm assuming, I think it's from an accredited university, isn't it, Robert? That we have the ability to grant the license. Glenn, did I state that correctly?
It really, and first of all, I want to start out and just open up and affirm the related science pathway or route, not a pathway, but a route. There's a lot of states that go that route. There's a lot of states, and Mr. Campbell articulated well, and I think it's a very formidable and it's a very comprehensive way to cure that, should you want to do that. Other states have chosen to do that through experience as well. But what we didn't see, what we saw is that the vast majority of states cured it either with related science or they cured it with experience. And so the legislators, having the benefit of both those routes, cured that with the experience. And the board themselves can certainly promulgate rules. That is well within their authority. But of course that would have to be within the statute. And it could be perceived, it is within the board's authority to promulgate those rules how they see fit. However, should we encroach upon anti-competitive practices, that could create some liability for us on that regard. But that's the concern. That's the debate. And then there appears to be those two positions.
Let's go back to the rule. I mean, what was actually passed by the legislature, since that's been referenced a couple of times. The legislature, in my opinion, did not cure this strictly based on experience. If you look in B, which is not part of the subsection B under number 3, I believe, it says the board shall, which is kind of one of those words, in its discretion set forth further criteria and rule specifying what constitutes acceptable four-year undergraduate curriculum. So again, not an attorney, didn't write the thing. However, what was passed, what was signed by the governor ultimately, says the board shall, again in its discretion, set forth further criteria, not existing, further criteria in rule specifying what constitutes an acceptable four-year undergraduate curriculum. It does say, yes, experience is part of that, but also there are an evaluation of the undergraduate curriculum. So we need to answer that question. That's in the law. I mean, I didn't write the law, didn't sign the law, didn't get the law passed. So we need to understand what that is, because my understanding is if it's in the law, we have to deal with it. And we can't just say, well, it appears the legislator said X, Y, and Z. Number one. The second thing is I keep hearing this anti-competition thing. And if we were being anti-competitive, we would have never, ever spent the time and effort to write this, allowing alternative ways to license. We would have never gone through the effort if we were trying to be anti-competitive. So I understand the North Carolina dental decision. I think we've way jumped the shark on that, because the North Carolina board was actually appointed by other dentists. It was not appointed by a governor or a state body, if you will. And we have been over backwards this way. And I'm not trying to get mad. I'm just trying to say the insinuation that this board has done anything but bend over backwards to allow somebody to get a license in the state of Tennessee. We just allowed somebody that had been disciplined in 2 states to have a license in the state of Tennessee. If we were being anti-competitive, we would not be allowing that. We wouldn't be allowing this. We would go strictly by what the rules say. We wouldn't allow people to cure their general education deficiencies. We wouldn't allow people who are structural engineers who may not have a chemistry class to get licensed. I think this board has been outstanding in the way that they try to get their applicants to yes. So, and again, I know the word anti-competition has got everybody worked up for some reason, but I just don't see that tag being applied to this board, and I don't see that as a reason that we can ignore what's in the rule. I mean, what's in the legislation that was passed. And the only thing I keep asking, and I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, for staying on point here too long, is that we as a board find a way to cure what was passed by the legislature in B. What is acceptable? What isn't acceptable for your undergraduate curriculum? I offered the Louisiana matrix as what Louisiana does. That doesn't mean that's the matrix, that's everything. But it is a pretty easy yes and no deal, because then it keeps us from having to go chase an art history degree, and my son's in art history, so you've not offended me often, although it seems like I've spent a boatload of money for that degree. But I do think there are certain undergraduate degrees that do not pair up very well with a master's in engineering, no matter how much we want to act like they do. So anyway, I just, those are my 2 concerns, Mr. Chairman, and that we've not cured B, and that we may be perceived by some as being anti-competitive. I just
let me respond to that in 25 words or less. I don't think we are anti-competitive. I think the question is whether or not we appear to be anti-competitive compared to other states. It's not a message. Open the door for it. And I think the other part of this is there's no way to write a law or a rule that will take into account every possible combination and permutation of experience and educational degree. Have to be subjective judgment that goes along with how much experience do they have, where are they practicing. I don't think that the hurts anything.
Well, but it has to be addressed in whatever rulemaking that we're doing.
With legal on that, and we're fortunate enough to have legal here. And so we asked them about B, because there was a lot being made of B, and so we knew that would be the point. That would be the item that we would have to address, and it was determined by legal up the chain that shall in its discretion mean you can, and we've always been honest about that. The board can promulgate rules. There's no doubt about that. All of our boards can promulgate rules. However, the rules you promulgate, if they were to encroach or appear to be anti-competitive, and that scope of anti-competitive means within the narrow scope of the statute itself. Well, the statute, what did it do? The statute provided a master's pathway and doubled the experience. And so that's the grounds and the environment for that was in view.
Before you speak, ask me. I wrote the master's degree thing. We were always going to couple it with some other underlying thing. We were always going to do that. Every member of the board that had participated in it, we were going to couple that with something. And again, that was my area of what we did. We were always going to couple it with something. So to say that, and here's the other thing, we did that because our charter is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public, of the citizens of Tennessee. That's our charter. There's no anti-competition in that charter, and we just want to make sure we get it right. And we don't know those underlying things. So I'll be quiet. I've spoke my piece.
What underlying?
The underlying things of the two marriage of the degrees not lining up, because we also discussed about how some universities allow people into their graduate master's programs just to fill a seat. And so we end up with potential engineers in the state of Tennessee who should not be engineers because they were not put through that. There are a bunch of states that don't allow master's degrees. And as a matter of fact, we didn't allow master's degrees until this thing was signed. And we as a board worked for 3 years to try to get that done.
Well, that's not entirely true. I got a master's degree approved 20 years ago.
20 years ago, but currently on the books before this got approved, there was not one.
Does the 8 years not, the additional 4 years does not cure it?
We still have another gatekeeper here. They still have to take and pass the PE. Right?
Yes, sir. They passed both tests.
Well, the FE and the PE, I suppose. So that's two gatekeepers. And achieve their master's in some field of engineering, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Go to grad school, we certain area of a certain branch of engineering. Since based on that item B, do we have the ability, for example, if we evaluate an application and we see a deficiency, we can ask the applicant to take a course in a certain area, for example? Is that not an option?
See, in Tennessee, we don't license structural, electrical, mechanical. Once you get your PE, you're supposed to be practicing in your field of competence, but you're a PE, not a civil PE or a structural PE or a mechanical PE.
But we do have the ability to evaluate degrees to see if they are equivalent to an undergraduate degree. The way the rule was going to be written now is if they have a master's degree and they have 8 years, a master's degree with a school that has an undergraduate in engineering, an ABET accredited, and 8 years experience, we can no longer ask them
and pass the FE and the PE.
And to cure those things. But we could, before this was written, we could say, well, you got a master's degree, so those 3 courses you had on master's level potentially would make your ABET degree curable, if you will, if that's the right term.
I will tell you, I really like the way it was written originally. I'm not sure we're going to really change what the department's opinion or recommendation is. I think if they feel like this is too restrictive, or in their opinion it's restricting or limiting commerce, and you started to let Stuart speak on this. So I'd really like to hear what he has to say about the recommendation that's being offered by the department and the legislature, I guess. The department then.
But Stuart can help you with any legal items, obviously, but once as far as policy and admin, the assistant commissioner's letter has articulated that. He won't be adding on that, but when it comes to the legal items, such as to Mr. Campbell's point, as the requirements or of that piece and what that indicates, he could, of course, and the implications of that, he could speak on that.
Well, I mean, I think Glenn said it perfectly. That, I mean, it's in your discretion. I mean, you can make rules. The board can make any rule they want. And that's why it says in there, in its discretion. But as far as the other questions, I can't answer to that.
Do we have information that indicates that the legislature is concerned that this is restricting free commerce? The way it was written originally, I'm sorry, the way that it was proposed?
We had it's of course some of our applicants were sort of in a holding pattern initially. We've gotten those approved since then, underneath the new statute. So thankfully but one of those applicants was eligible as a result of or resides in one of the jurisdictions of one of the co-signers. And so, but we don't obviously we interpret the statute that's before us, because we can't read into it other than what's there. And so a lot of times there's a lot of brokers that will come to the table, or there'll be a lot of stakeholders, folks that will bring their input, lobby associations, the public, a lot of different folks, but the statute doesn't always come out based on all of that input. There's been many times the departmental, and it's the prerogative of the legislator to do that. We'll send up recommendations for departmental bills, and then some of the things we recommended doesn't make it in the bill.
Did a legislature propose this change? A legislator propose this change?
There's as it goes through committee, there's multiple changes. As it is written. I mean, we don't have like a historical. I can't map that out, but oftentimes there's quite a few changes that will go into the mix. But it's what comes out the other side is what we're having to deal with.
And Robert, just one more before I yield the floor. Is what's proposed here how the legislation was? It's not how the legislation was written and passed, correct?
It's not the original form. No.
Okay. So no, this would be what are the logistics associated with changing what was passed and implementing this?
It'll oftentimes it'll go through several different reviews, but it's the end product is what we're dealing with, or that what we have to enforce. And so and that was the other thing too I wanted to mention. The legislators would have had all of the information as it pertains to related science language. So that was sort of, if one of the things that we were struggling with on the other side of this was, if they intended to take the related science path, why wasn't that written related science? Because that was articulated in other statutes or in other jurisdictions that we've looked at throughout the industry. And so again, that's why we went to the legal and asked them, is it required? Are they saying you must promulgate rules? They're saying you shall, in its discretion. And it was that in its discretion that at that point was reinforcing the board's their right to do so. but not requiring that they must do so.
I'm going to yield the floor to Robert.
So you asked how the legislators came up with this language. This is, I believe, verbatim the language we supplied them as a board on when we worked to the 3 different pathways of licensure. I don't think the legislature changed a word that we put in here. And the reason that I know that is, again, we dealt with this as a board. And one of the reasons you write rules, let's go back to our civics lessons, is to interpret what the legislature says, right? The legislature passes a law. It's a little, not sure, so you write a rule. We know what the rule is because we wrote the thing. We knew that our intention was always to come back to something that would qualify a 4-year undergraduate degree. That's why we discussed this thing for 3 years the way we did. So I don't have to go back to the legislature to know what the board at that time was talking about and deciding on and the basis they were doing it, because the legislature looked at this and didn't make a change to what we submitted. Okay? I mean, and so I know what we were thinking when we passed it, when we brought it out and put it forward. I don't have to ask the legislature, and they didn't change a thing. So again,
my concern wasn't that. My concern was, did something happen after this got passed that somebody raised an issue or a problem with that's requiring the change now?
I heard him say they think it's anti-competitive for us not to go with the to write the rule in another way. And if it was anti-competitive, why did the law get passed the way it did?
While I agree with everything Robert said, I think this is probably a foregone conclusion. And just to try to move this along, I'm going to make a motion that we approve it as presented. Because not because I necessarily agree with these changes, but because I know that we've still got the 3 gateways that they have to get through in order to get a PE in this state.
We get back to the original. This legislation has been passed. Not up to us to approve it, is it? They don't care whether we approve this legislation or not, do they?
No, they do not. The rules should flow out of the legislation, and so if there's some ambiguity, then of course we would work on that. But you're correct.
So
we're being asked to change or approve this change or vote on this change and accept this change as proposed, correct?
Or we're the verbatim from the rules. The rules were a reiteration of the statute. Yes. So we based on the red line rules that you have before you, there's been no additions to the public chapter. That's or any qualifications. That much is true.
There has been a deletion from the public chapter. Section B is not addressed.
Right, and that was deliberate because you don't reiterate in rules that you have the opportunity or you have the right to make rules. So that would get struck down as it goes up the because you're reiterating that we can make rules. We're going to make a rule that we can make rules.
But we're making a rule about what the underlying part of that is. We're not making a rule about making a rule. We're making a rule about what the qualifying degree is. That's not making a rule about making a rule, but whatever. I mean,
this legislation gives us the right to do.
We're foregoing the right to make a qualifying undergraduate degree by not having this in the rule.
At this time you are. If you were to, but you would have the opportunity, should you have a change of heart down the road, or if something was to present itself, to make rules again, or at the rulemaking hearing as well. Should the rules get approved in this run, then you could go to the rulemaking hearing and then either raise voices to memorialize of dissent or in support of as well. So it's not like this is your only opportunity, and if you miss it, then it's never coming back again. You could do that if the board decided in the future to further qualify and go to related science pathway. That is true. You could do that if you wanted to.
But if the perception is that the way it was originally written is considered as potentially blocking the path, unfairly blocking the path to licensure or uncompetitively blocking the path to licensure? What makes us think that will change in the future?
That is the perception. But I guess that's that's for the obviously the board to decide. But that is the perception and the concern.
Motion stands.
Would you repeat the motion so I know what action we're trying to take here?
In regards to the red line rules as written, is that what you had?
Yes.
Okay.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Well, I'll second it.
For it to make it out of committee into the full board as a motion, then we would need a majority of the voting members of the committee. So all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any in dissent? Okay. Dr. asked for you an aye or a dissent.
Can I bring some?
Oh, please. Yeah,
Yes, sir.
absolutely.
Ash, make sure you're speaking into the microphone.
Okay. So item B is going to be taken out or going to stay?
No, item B will remain in the statute because we can't do anything about the statute. The board, when they make rules, item B is not included in the rules because you're saying in the rules we can make rules, and so that was a redundancy that we knew wouldn't get past review. So but the item B will remain in the public statute as written by the legislators.
It can be used.
Correct. Well, it can't be used in the applications if it's not in rules. But if the board was to come back later and say, hey, we want to go the related science route, then you certainly could revisit that and then articulate some sort of grid or some related science route. But as it stands now, we wouldn't be able to use the related science route for review of applications.
Until we change the rules, if we change the rules.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay.
And this legislation specifically gives us the right to do that in the future.
Yes, sir, you could do that. That's
Okay.
correct.
Since I've been around for a year, how long did y'all write on this? Because you were writing on it when
3 years.
At least 3 years.
Yeah.
On all four of them, all four of the new items that passed the legislature.
Isn't the document that the governor signed? Why do we want to take it out? I mean,
it's not taken out. The item B remains. That's the law of the land. The governor did sign it, and the legislation passed that, and the governor signed it. So that is the law of the land. B is with us until until it gets repealed, if it ever does. But so B is ours. The board, and it's just a reiteration of the fact that the board can and has the authority to promulgate rules. The question just being, would those rules run afoul of the legislative intent? And there's differences, as you heard today, opinions on both sides of that. And then there's some perception that could be anti-competitive. Of course, there's a position on both sides of that as well. And so as the rule stands right now, with everything in the public chapter reiterated in the rules, with B not included as a part of the rules, because that's the law trumps the rules. So it's still included in the sense that it's the law, but it's just not reiterated again in the rules.
That's a good question. You just made a statement that if we include B, you said that it would run afoul of the legislative intent. Can you explain that to me?
No, not. It doesn't run afoul of the legislative intent in the sense that because that is their intent. The public chapter is the legislative intent. What I'm saying is that it wouldn't be in the rules because you're saying we have the right to make a rule in your rules, which you already have because you're the board and you have the right to promulgate rules.
But we also have the right to put a qualifying degree in the rule.
You could do that, yes, sir.
Okay.
Change the rule.
And I'm telling you that was this board's intent as we writing it. But
we still have the right to do that, Robert. That doesn't mean we.
Yeah, in 4 or 5 years we do, because that's about how long it would take to get back through this process and keep going through it. I mean, that's the reality of the rulemaking.
As if I'm looking at the application right now, based on our discussion here, and basically if he has the 8 years of experience, passed the FE, passed the PE,
It has a
and
master's
has a master or PhD, that's automatic.
in engineering.
Yes, that's automatic approval. So it's not up to me to say that this is a degree in history or a degree in a completely different area.
Undergraduate degree, right?
Yeah, the undergraduate degree.
That's correct. Yeah, you still added. You're doubling the experience. So let's not forget that you're working under a licensed profession twice as long as somebody with an undergraduate degree with a related science.
It's either aye or nay, or is no abstain.
So
My
Which
first
you
day
ordered.
here, so
But, I mean, I think that is a little. I think that is a little unfair for your first meeting to have to come to something that we've been working on for 3.
Yes, you may abstain, sir. Yeah, that's your prerogative if you'd like to do that.
that's
Okay, very well. So we've got a majority in the committee, but it won't make it to the board as a motion since we don't have a majority of our voting members. But nonetheless, so we'll have the discussion in a broader context within the full board meeting. Unless I'm missing something, Stuart, is that correct? All right, that is correct. That's the opinion of on that regard. That unless there's any additional comments,
I do have one additional comment.
Yes, sir.
If this came up, if this thing about in rule had come, why weren't we directed on that to begin with, where we could have corrected it before we had to go through all of this that we just went through?
Well, I can't answer that, sir. I wasn't there, but I understand the frustration, and that's there's been again when there's been things that that have come out of departmental bill, and then when they come back, they may look a little differently. But then again, we work as an advisory, and we work for the legislator, and so if it's their prerogative, if they come back with something that we had not anticipated, then we work within the confines of whatever that public chapter is.
Thank you, Glenn.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, of course, it doesn't really matter if you mind or not. I'm already talking on this one, right?
That's all.
All right. I want to revisit the anti-competitive thing again. What is the proof of anti-competitiveness? Okay. I mean, again, to me, it's an eye of the beholder thing. Number 2, I understand by the legislation passed 4 or 5 years ago that any decision of this board can be overruled by commissioner, assistant commissioner. I can't remember exactly what that is, but then they have to report that to the House subcommittee or House committee on something. And I don't remember what that is either. So what criteria would they go back to the House sub? And it has to be a rule. It has to be something strictly related to competition. It can't be anything not related to anti-competition. What criteria does the department use to determine anti-competition? Because if you've got a do's and don't, what do you have in the department that would cause you to look at something that's done this way that actually opens up the access to engineering? What do you have that says, oh no, it violates point C, or it some sort of some?
I would answer that. Our rules are more restrictive than 40 other states, and that opens us up.
But we're in the middle.
Well, and the scope is more narrowly specific even than that. I mean, is it more restrictive than what the statute itself intends or is strictly articulated? If we anti-competitive, meaning if we don't allow folks into the field, into the profession, based on and yet our statute, and we do this by our rules when the statute allows that, that would be anti-competitive. And, anti-competitive in the broader sense is what Chairman Barrick was discussing about too, would apply in the sense that, but not maybe narrowly specific to the policy director, what they're looking at, but in the market sense, but that would extend beyond really the scope of the policy director. But at the same time too, we don't want, we look at the other states just as a survey, as an indicator, but it's our laws and our rules that we follow, and that's really the scope of what we have in view. And so, and I'll leave it at that, but because I don't want to get in territory that doesn't belong to me, that we have a policy director in conjunction, and Mr. Campbell pointed some of that out with our executive that makes those determinations, and they put that under review. And it's not done in isolation, but it's not one individual, just our policy director. It's a team of folks that look at that, and then legal weighs in on that. And based on the strict interpretation of the law, are we either being anti-competitive by rejecting applications that would qualify under the law, or do our rules are such that they're being anti-competitive and blocking people from the industry as well?
Glenn, that's part of my frustration. We've been doing this for 3 years with legal engaged in the process. So we should have known that before this thing got sent to the legislature.
We should have known that was a possibility.
Yeah.
And it's just now come to light in the last year that that something could be perceived as anti-competitive. But yet we still, the law and the rule in this case match up except for B. And again, that's part of whatever. But then nobody can tell. I mean, Rob, I appreciate exactly what you're saying. But we're kind of in the middle. There's some states that allow what we do, some that don't. And we've been busting our tail to try to get to where we are more. We try to align ourselves as close as possible, but the license is still issued by state.
That was the whole start of this,
yeah, it was. We were trying to get to where we could open the tent a little bit more and try because we understood things were a little bit more non-traditional, and there were things that people that were getting unfairly because of how restrictive our statute was. Again, going by the statute, not by what we made up. It's what was in the statute.
And since I wasn't around at the beginning,
I understand. No.
I would say that the intent was alternate ways to licensure.
It was.
And while it's not perfect, mission's accomplished. 3 years worth of work, we got something done that does allow that.
But we've taken something out potentially if this rule gets passed that allows us to go back and evaluate something that we may want to go back. And again, I know what we had from an intention standpoint when we sent that out.
What's in the rule right now that is specifically in violation of this?
Because we are not establishing a qualifying degree. That was in the legislation. It says in our discretion we can do that. But I'm going back to the bigger point. We've already voted on that one. The bigger point is anti-competitiveness. I don't understand how that determination is made. And I understand but I don't understand when somebody looks at something and goes, yeah, that's anti-competitive, man. You can tell that. I just don't get that.
Where other states that similar cases in other states?
I think as part of Robert's proposal or the development of this particular piece of legislation, he researched many other states. I don't know if he did all of them or not, but you looked at everything that was out there on the qualifying masters, and that's what we did the same thing. And the other elements that we were all charged with or responsible for helping craft the legislation for is we looked at what other states were doing in that similar for whatever that similar pathway was. Engineering technology. No, way beyond that.
But I mean, we weighted the states next door a little more.
Gentlemen, I hate to
heavily.
just sort of kind of give you we're approaching 2:00 and we've got a grants committee right behind us. It does appear that we voted on both items unless there was any new business that anybody wanted to discuss.
Is there any more new business? Otherwise, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Peace.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Did you receive the spreadsheet I think Glenn sent out to everybody?
Yes, I did.
And have you had a chance to kind of review everything along that bottom tab, the requests that were made by each of the individual entities? I reviewed it just to make sure that nothing was requested that was not allowed under the statute. So, and it looks like everything that is requested is an allowable expenditure.
Alton, sorry to interrupt you. For the sake of formality, if you've already called it to order, it's to 2:21, I believe.
I'm sorry, we didn't do a roll call.
Yes,
though.
sir.
Sorry, Glenn, would you please do a roll call?
Yes, sir. Alton Heathcote.
Yes, believe it or not, I'm here.
Melanie Doss.
Here.
Frank Waxter.
Here.
And Brian Tibbs. So since we don't have physical quorum, we won't be able to vote on any action, but you can have your work group discussion and we'll do the voting tomorrow. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. And just for clarification, Frank, what we had talked about doing is taking a recess from the board meeting tomorrow right before the committee reports so that we can have an official committee report and we can all get together and vote when we will have a full quorum present.
Okay.
All right, so today what we want to do is make sure that we answer or address any questions and make sure everybody's, I guess, square and in agreement with what the revised total grant awards or the total grant award recommendations are. So has everybody had a chance to review the data and information? And I apologize for the spreadsheet. I think if you click in any of the numbers, you ought to be able to follow the equation and see kind of how the totals were arrived at. One of the things that I will say is that in performing the calculations, one of the things that happens is there's usually, because some of the entities actually requested less money than they were eligible for, and the only thing we can do is grant them what they request, the maximum amount that they requested. So what I have to do is I have to determine what the leftover money is and then reallocate it in a pro rata based on enrollment distribution back to those individual colleges. And then sometimes when we do that, the reallocation puts other schools over their requested amount. So it's an iterative process where I have to go through and I can't give anybody more than what they ask for. So this is the final analysis, I guess.
Right, and Alton, this is Frank. That was my major question, I guess, because I did go through each one of these proposals and, kind of compared them to the request. And I guess the one that really stuck out that kind of like you're talking about was UTK's engineering request for $30,000, and then their available amount, I guess you'd say, would be like $59,000. And I was thinking,
actually, it was the total grant amount would have been $75,745. They were eligible for, because what we do, Frank, is we take, if we've got $400,000 that we're going to divvy up, what we do is we say, okay, look, in this particular case, we're going to take half of that money and we're going to distribute it equally. That $200,000 we're going to distribute on a kind of a pro rata basis to each of the schools: architectural schools, engineering design, and interior design and engineering distributions. Yeah. The other 50% we're going to base on enrollment. So that way, somebody like the let's just pick one off the list, and this is arbitrary. The ETSU interior design doesn't wind up getting $65.
Right.
So, anyway.
Yeah, and my question was, the overage, and I think you just explained it, but how that's redistributed.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, it looks good to me. I have had a chance to kind of go over the spreadsheet.
All right. So, Melanie, do you have any questions?
Oh, I have no questions. I was very impressed with a number of the recent their funds.
Yeah.
That was very impressive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I'm glad they're taking advantage, not taking advantage, but using the opportunity to use these funds to an incredible opportunity for the students.
Me too.
That's great.
It's fun to read. One, I love the fact that they're helping defray and offset some of the costs for these students to pursue either license or registration. And that's always important. But some of the stuff that they're doing as far as projects or getting to go see things in actual application or some of the equipment that they're buying, it's impressive.
Yes, and I think the pandemic sort of allowed them to refocus or encouraged them to refocus how they could use this money. I think they may have been in a little bit of a rut, and now that travel is back open and just a lot more opportunities.
I agree.
It's really nice. It's very good. I'm glad we've raised the dollar amount.
So for this next year, it'll be $450, so even better. All right. So if nobody has any objections, I think probably tomorrow when we're together again, we'll have to make sure that Brian understands everything and he doesn't have any other issues. But we'll meet tomorrow before the committee reports and vote to make the awards. Frank, are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Melanie, you agree?
I agree.
Okay.
But you all made this very painless. I was expecting something else. So you guys just do all the work on the front end, don't you?
We try. We try very hard to do that.
Well, I like that. That's all right. So I think you have a plan, and I've made a note here. And then when we get to the agenda, we'll ask for that edit and do exactly as you stated.
Okay. Very good. I suppose then we need a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Frank?
Second.
There you have it. We are adjourned. Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate your work.
Thank you.
All right. See ya.
Thanks, Frank.
Thanks,
See you
sir.
tomorrow.
Okay.